again welcome our guest, David Fitzsimmons, and it's only right that we end our calendar year, our academic year, excuse me, with David, who just helped us kick off the pandemic, if you want to think of it that way. Basically, I'm going to turn off my share so you can see Mr. Fitzsimmons. He looks fresh and renewed. He's vaccinated. I think he's even been out in the sun. He's got some vitamin D going. He's looking pretty amazing, And we're very happy to have David back with us today. And I'll give you the bio that I always read. David, we're gonna have to update this because they could probably read this back verbatim at this point, but we thank you so much for your continued support of our program and being part of OLLI. But David Fitzsimmons is the cartoonist and columnist for the Arizona Daily Star, where he began drawing cartoons back when Geronimo was just a paperboy, right around 1986. A Pulitzer finalist, Fitz's cartoons are syndicated to over 800 news publications around the world. The Arizona Press Club voted him the best columnist in the state. What do they know? No one in the news or in his audience is safe when his pen is uncapped. Described as a flaming moderate at the fringe of America's center, Fitz is a snappy dresser who loves reading hate mail from readers and making kids laugh. And we, again, really appreciate you being with us, David, and welcome you back to OLLI, and I will let you take it away.
Thank you, Scott, for that very kind introduction. And in spite of your introduction being kind, that certainly would not prevent me from rendering a likeness of you, Scott. Mr. OLLI, man, there you are, brother.
No one is safe, as he says.
No one is safe when this pen is uncapped. Thank you for having me as a guest yet again. This presentation today will be a bit different in feeling, format, and function than past presentations. I thought for this one, I would bravely come out of the closet in a sense and explain my very partisan politics. And for those of you who disagree with my politics, I don't know what to tell you, other than the next hour and a half is mine. And when it comes time for questions, feel free to hammer me. My logic is that if I explain my own partisan political point of views and how I came to them, that perhaps it might resonate with many of you to explore how you came to hold the political views that you hold. Because I have to say, as a young man, I was not a very political creature, which brings me to my PowerPoint, which I will now share with you all. And I promise I will keep an eye open to the chat. And if I see a question that seems relevant to the moment, I will pause and I will answer that question. But for the most part, feel free to save them for the conversation at the end of the PowerPoint. Either way is fine with me. On a day like this in beautiful sunny Tucson, Arizona, there's no point in stressing over anything. And now I'm going to attempt the share screen feature to share my shameless, beautiful PowerPoint. Let's get it up and going right to the beginning. Boom, boom, boom. Where is it? There we go. Desktop 1, that would be me. And here we go. Ho ho! Well, tell me, Scott, is this visible?
It is visible.
Fabulous! Best start ever, at least today. I'm going to begin with the 60s. That's when I was a kid. I was born in 1955, the era of Eisenhower and Truman. When I mention those names, kids in the schools give me a blank stare as if I'd mentioned Marcus Aurelius and Julius Caesar. But some of you kids in this OLLI group may actually know this period of time. My childhood took place in the 60s, and I was greatly influenced by these two jokers on either side of me, my two beloved late brothers. On the left is my brother Don, who served as a medic in Vietnam, 2 tours of duty. And on my right is my older brother Bob, who recently passed away. who served in Vietnam as an Air Force officer. With a lot of correspondence between us during the Vietnam War, I became politicized. Reading between the lines of their letters, I could sense that they were distressed by the futility of the war that they were engaged in. And those two dear gentlemen did politicize me. I grew up in a military family. My dad was a master sergeant. I am very proud to have grown up in a military family. And I believe that accounts for why I'm Arizona's worst nightmare, a liberal with discipline. Look at this boy, Civil Air Patrol, right? Ready to go to Vietnam, serve his country. The year I was number 3 in the lottery, the monies were pulled by Congress and the war ended. But by then, in spite of my love of country, sense of service to country, I was already questioning authority, working for the high school newspaper, and I had no idea that decades later, I'd be an old curmudgeon / political cartoonist working for a newspaper in America. I'm going to talk today a little bit about 2020 and how I believe we came to be where we are at. Please remember, this is my opinion, not the opinion of OLLI. Well, first, it is my opinion. It's warm out. Here in Tucson, Arizona, I believe it's 317 degrees. Summer's here. It's good to be indoors and zooming with you all. 2020, those numbers. Oh, I am so glad those numbers are history now. And please, old man time, stand 6 feet away. What a year. A year of turmoil brought on by the President of the United States, a year of pain and suffering brought on by a pandemic, which we all endured. Boom. Not to mention, hey, is no one willing to take the necessary steps to stop human-caused climate change? Anyone? Anyone? Asked Greta. Well, there was one force in the cosmos that was happy to move us to contemplate the impact of climate change, the pandemic. Wow, that was a tough pandemic. I missed my grandkids, didn't see them for a year. That was a tough year apart. Some of us, like myself, lost friends dear to us. Everybody was impacted by this, save for those who denied that it even existed. And here we are in the present moment, when we have a president of the United States who wants to build back America better, and we have a Republican Senate minority leader who's 100% opposed to participating in any kind of bipartisanship with the Democratic president, because he's busy building a better bunker for his baddie band of bamboozled, bunk-peddling, belligerent bozos. Would you like a tinfoil hard hat? Yes, forgive me, my friends to the right, my conservative Republican friends, but this is my belief. This is what has become of this party. Where do I claim to have my expertise in the right from? From my 35 years as a journalist, working as a hermit in my studio. And unlike all of you, I listen to right-wing talk radio day after day for 35 years. 2013, woo, long time ago. I love digging back in a time. I'm going to bounce you all over recent history with this PowerPoint. 2013, hey, we were hoping to be bipartisan, get stuff done, right? But here's the truth. Voters who are upset that nothing is getting done in Washington, there they are, mad as heck. And then over here, voters who support politicians willing to compromise. 2013, nah, we're not really into compromise in the United States, not now. This is 2013, and I would say this was 1, 2, well, maybe 2.5 decades after the fairness doctrine was dumped. Rush Limbaugh took to the airways, Newt Gingrich came into power, and the right wing bonded with the Christian evangelicals and decided to take no prisoners, to not compromise. He's worried about the Democrats taking away his guns, and I'm worried about the Republicans taking away his meds. Tough times. Here's the old Republican Party that I grew up with in my household, where Dad was sort of a Nixon, Truman kind of centrist. He liked the old Republican Party, the mind your own business party, but you can see on the right, no. Now they're the party of cultural war. Why? My theory, it's the only way you can win. You can't really win on fantasy ideologies like trickle-down economics, which benefit only a narrow number of voters. But if you run on cultural issues like Dr. Seuss and murdering babies, you got a winner. The nice thing about this is you never really have to talk about complicated issues like policy. 2021, back to the present. Well, look at that. You are trespassing on the property of the state of Arizona. Here at the state level and states throughout the United States, the Republican Party dominates politically thanks to these culture wars. And we are seeing the impact of their dominance, passing very harsh pro-life regulations, which I think folks who may not be aware of this news, they may discover in the days, weeks, and months ahead. And in our legislature, under our governor, I drew this cartoon suggesting for their 2020 session, why bother meeting in Phoenix? They should be meeting in the biosphere because it's got an airtight seal. It keeps the 21st century out and the 1950s in. Because our legislature, dominated by rurals, is anti-education, anti-intellectual, devoutly religious, and many were indirect participants in the criminal insurrection. 2020. What a year. My kid graduated from high school this year, and what a great diploma and award he received. A world on fire. The torch has been passed, kid. Man, I pity you. I'm 66 years old, and I am so happy to be my age and not facing the problems that my generation permitted to fester. 1973. Here I am, permitting problems to fester. I was graduating from high school. I'd worked for the school newspaper. I worked for a publication called the Frumious Bandersnatch and discovered that the FBI, through the Freedom of Information Act, I discovered the FBI had files on me for my anti-war cartoons published in this ridiculous little publication, the Frumious Bandersnatch. Point of pride. Well, by 1974, I had enrolled at the University of Arizona, and I began working for the Arizona Daily Wildcat, drawing cartoons to that publication. I drew cartoons to that publication in my sophomore, junior, and senior year and graduated as an art major. I decided not to pursue ROTC at my two older brothers' urging, but they did insist that I seek out some kind of service. And I always imagined in my own mind that being a journalist was a form of public service. So I graduated from the University of Arizona after drawing award-winning cartoons for the Wildcat. And I looked around, there were no cartoonists who had died or retired that year among the 200 plus cartoonists who are working at newspapers around the United States then. Today, I am one of 21 remaining editorial cartoonists. So 1977, I get my first job at a newspaper. It's in Oklahoma. Because I grew up here, I believe that God decided I had not seen enough white people, so he sent me to Oklahoma. I have to admit, growing up on an integrated Air Force base, I was astonished and naive. I was naive and I was astonished by the de facto segregation I found there, the racism I found there, and also the history I found there of, for example, the dreadful, horrifying Tulsa Massacre. In Oklahoma City, I worked for the Oklahoma City Times. Everyone at one course in their career must work at a wretched paper or two so they can learn what a good newspaper is like. I enjoyed working the Oklahoma City Times, loved the people of Oklahoma. Most were decent, kind, and good people. And I must say my one memory of Oklahoma was walking past the Murrah Federal Building every day to work and watching the parents drop their kids off at the childcare that was in that building. That years later, when I was working elsewhere, I saw in the morning news, devastated by a right-wing white supremacist who believed fantasy theories and hated the federal government, so much so that he would murder over 100 of our fellow citizens in Oklahoma City. Well, at the Oklahoma City Times, they employed a cartoonist named Jim Lang, who was a wonderful old guy. I couldn't bear his cartoons. He was the opposite of me. His cartoons were so conservative, day after day after day. He knew his audience. Oklahomans loved his cartoons. I complained because then I was not a cartoonist. My first job, I was a map maker. But I ran into Jim on the elevator at work, and I discovered an incredibly kind, thoughtful man, and my political opposite. And somehow we hit it off, me and this old fella. And he gave me lots of wonderful advice about cartooning and tried to help me find work as a political cartoonist. And I remember saying, aren't you worried about the people you upset with your cartoons? And Jim said, no, it's my job to be as partisan as possible, to express my viewpoint and nobody else's. And if you get hate mail and death threats, you know you're doing your job. I thought, wow, that's great advice. I think I could aim high for that. Well, I moved on in 1981 to Virginia, where I was hired away because by then I'd moved up from map maker to art director. And I was hired as a graphics director in Virginia at a beautiful, wonderful newspaper, the Virginian Pilot Ledger-Star. This is a current issue. But back then, as a graphic director, I won national awards for page design. But I still longed to be a political cartoonist. And at this paper, I made friends with an individual who helped me reach my goal. At the Virginian Pilot Ledger-Star, there was a young, very political, right-wing columnist and a great friend of mine. His name was Tony. And we liked to go to the bars in beautiful Tidewater and argue over politics endlessly. Well, Tony got snapped up by a competing paper across the bay, a wretched little paper called the Daily Press of Newport News. And Tony called me and he said, guess what? I got a budget. Are you tired of being an art director? I know you want to do political cartoons. How would you like to come with me and be a political cartoonist? It was 1983. I was so excited by this, but I said, Tony, you're to the right of Attila the Hun. And he said, yeah, I know. You're to the left of Leon Trotsky. We'll have fun. We'll have a great time. And so we did. I worked for the Daily Press then for a number of years with my good friend Tony Snow, drawing editorial cartoons and both of us getting into trouble with readers. Here he is at the end of his career. Tony Snow went on to become the press secretary in the White House for George W. Bush. We remain good friends. In fact, I would text him from time to time, teasing him, saying, you're smarter than the man you're speaking for. Sadly, Tony left the world in 2008, and I will always consider his friendship and his kindness towards me a blessing. But I would also add, this man today would not be welcome in the present state of the party he at one time represented. 1986. By then, my begging had paid off. I'd been begging the Arizona Daily Star to hire me since I was a high schooler, since Geronimo was a paperboy. Finally, I got the call. Back to Arizona I came, happily. Oh, I was so thrilled to be back in the state I grew up in, and the state that I knew would be a gold mine for political cartoons. The Arizona Daily Star said yes, and I was so excited to begin drawing in 1986. Well, let's jump ahead to 2012. What kind of issues am I drawing cartoons about? Arizona, always in the news. Welcome to Arizona, as seen on Comedy Central's Daily Show. Makes you proud, don't it? Arizona has been a political joke as long as I can recall, including this cartoon from 2012. 2013, quite often immigration was a significant issue here. Well, it still is. And here's my take on it back 1,000 years ago in 2013. There aren't enough young workers to sustain the system for all the retiring boomers, says Uncle Sam. Huh, where, oh, where could we find a zillion young workers? Ho, ho, poof, right there. Maybe a little immigration reform could bring us the labor we are going to need. I'm looking for white ones. 2014. What would happen if 12 million illegal immigrants were likely to vote Republican? Poof! Immigration reform now. It's my sense that this argument that letting in immigrants will ensure that it's just a device for the Democratic Party to enlarge its ranks. Oh man, the desperation that moves some arguments. Oh, this was a letter I received in response to this recently, a cartoon. So this is the kind of mail I get from the right. And today, the political right is just aflame. Have you tried AA, Arizona's Anonymous? We don't tell anyone we're from Arizona. Well, what's step one? I'm powerless to control our wingnuts and our democracies become unmanageable. That might be it. I like to tell people I'm from a more progressive state, Mississippi. Oh, it's unbelievable how our nation handled the pandemic. What a disappointment. What appeasement. What grotesque, horrifying surrender to an aerial assault. Here rests in eternal shame the unknown outcome if America had followed science. Over 500,000 dead. And I blame it on, in part, the bubble. The bubble, a manufactured bubble. According to the CDC, masks are 100% more effective than bubbles at stopping COVID-19 and media echo chambers. The bubble was created, the fairness doctrine is abandoned. Reagan comes to the ascendancy. Rush Limbaugh rolls into might on the radio. Fox News comes up in the 90s. And you have this division between mainstream media and right-wing propaganda media, claiming the mainstream media is a lamestream media that lies to you. The only bearer of the truth is the new right-wing media, which is funded by billionaires who are funding the think tanks and these various networks of communication and propaganda. Propaganda calling things fake news. The coronavirus is a hoax. Remember it was a hoax? Remember like a miracle it would go away? The chloroquine was the cure, and that we're rounding the corner, and maybe we ought to inject bleach and it'll be over by Easter. How soon we forget. How soon we forget that losers wear masks, science is stupid, and the pandemic was a hoax. See no facts, speak no facts, hear no facts. And I do watch these news outlets quite a bit these days, in spite of the amount of Pepto-Bismol it costs me. Peace on earth, the Trumper would say, no, America first. Goodwill towards all. Huh, not Biden and his satanic socialists. For unto you is born a savior. Hey, Donald Trump, do unto others tyranny. Everything is tyranny to the right today. And this man was running for the presidency for re-election. He wanted to be president, I believe, of the Confederate States of America. And I was really surprised he was actually running in this century, because I could have sworn he was running maybe 1860 or so, post-Reconstruction. Well, today, the same group is very upset with and critical of critical race theory, which I view as simply a mirror which we hold up to ourselves. Some do not want to hold a mirror up to ourselves. In my travels, I visited beautiful Germany, and I was impressed the people of Munich decided after merely 50, 60 years to talk about their role in the rise of the Nazis in their city, via a museum which they consecrated in 2015. Sometimes it takes generations to get over the wounds of racial hatred. Abraham Trump's Gettysburg Address. Don't be suckers like these losers who gave the last full measure of devotion that this nation might live without asking what's in it for them. It's amazing to me the things he could say in terms of insulting the United States military. Now, many members of the United States military just blew it off I myself, once he opened his mouth and dared to insult the man I considered my friend, the late Senator John McCain, his coffin nail was hammered in tight from my perspective. I thought his remarks were despicable and disgusting, criticizing John McCain as not being a war hero, the draft dodger. Ugh. This is my great-great-great-grandfather. John is his name, and he served in Company D out of Oregon during the Civil War, and he fought to preserve our Union. This is a picture taken of him that was long after his service to the Union. And I feel a bond with this man because I feel today I fight and we fight to preserve the same Union. Don't be suckers. He was a sucker, I'm a sucker. The many hats of the party of Lincoln: stop slavery, preserve the Union. It's morning in America. Ronald Reagan, an inspiring leader, looking to trigger a rebirth of the American economy, arguing the benefits of trickle down and the Laffer curve, which is complete, utter nonsense that only benefited the wealthy and few others. And then Donald Trump, a member of that wealthy class, I'd say probably easily one of the 1%. The end justifies the lies. Make America great again. And now where are we? The end. The party of QAnon. I do get into trouble with my cartoons. I got into trouble nationally at various school districts because teachers would use my cartoons in classroom exercises, particularly middle school social studies teachers. This was a cartoon in response to the murder of George Floyd. Remember, he said, I can't breathe, were his final words. Well, here's a slaver with his neck on a man claiming I. And then here's a slaving American with his neck on a man. I can't. And then post-Reconstruction, here's a Klansman trying to preserve the status quo in the South. I can't. And then we have the Jim Crow era. I can't, this poor man says. And then in Minneapolis, 2020, I can't breathe. Well, this cartoon upset the folks of Wiley, Texas. This is one community, predominantly a white suburb, of course, upper class, so you know it's going to be conservative. They were upset that their darlings brought home this cartoon as part of a work assignment. It made its way to the National Fraternal Order of Police, and the VP of the National Fraternal Order tweeted that my cartoon was, an abhorrent and disgusting bit of cartoonage that widens the gap between cops and youth, unlike the wanton homicide of young African Americans. No, that doesn't widen the gap between cops and their youth. Plus, he describes this as, I'm comparing cops to slave owners. I don't think that was the point of the cartoon. The governor of Texas, a shameless political whore, dove on this. He called for the TEA to investigate. He wanted the teacher who used the cartoon fired. He wanted the assignments pulled. A free speech coalition got engaged. He milked this for all it's worth. Why? Because his state is a disaster in terms of the pandemic. And remember what happened when it turned a little cold in Texas? If I were him, I would have milked these ridiculous cultural issues for all they were worth, because that's all he has. Well, it was an interesting vote on the ballot in 2020. I chose D for democracy. It says here, Trump to negotiate third term, says I'm entitled to it. Well, calm down. The New York Southern District prosecutors say one term will be sufficient. See, I'm an optimist. Well, this is what happened after the election in 2020. In 2021, a mob of insurrectionists, aided by members of Congress, aided by their political party, backed and supported by their political party's president, attacked the Capitol of the United States of America with lies, insurrection, mob rule, and violence. 2011, Let's go back in time. Donald Trump, my first cartoon about the man. Should I run in 2012? Do I have what it takes? You got money, and you got money. And did I mention you got money? You're fired. 2020. Using images posted online, the FBI identifies a ringleader of the Capitol Hill insurrection at his compound. There he is. Has he been fired by his employer yet? Well, good news, he was fired. Oh, the poor insurrectionists. They're a little saddened that they're being rounded up and arrested. Poor baby. Look on the bright side. You will never feel as persecuted or betrayed by your country as every Black, brown, and Muslim American felt every time they ventured out into your America for the last 4 years. Arizona. We can be proud of the wingnuts that we send to Congress. We can be proud of the lunatics who participated directly and indirectly in the insurrection. Arizona Congressman Debbie Lesko, buy the lie, Trump is king. She voted not to certify. Arizona Congressman Kosar, we know he's a lunatic. He was the chief spreader of the lies, happily willing to overturn the will of the state's voters. And Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs as well. Trump is his dictator. And lower in the right-hand corner, Oath Keepers Unite, our own local star down here in Southern Arizona, Mark Fincham. Well, they're upset because Arizona went for Biden. And McSally and Donald Trump lost. And I was particularly happy for the ghost of Senator John McCain and for his widow, Mrs. McCain. What a happy consequence. And now we have the modern era. Kirsten Sinema is a senator from the beautiful state of Arizona, elected recently. I would have voted for the Insurrection Commission if I'd been there. But that's not what Arizona voters sent me to the Senate to do. They sent me here to blow up the internet, strike a pose, vamp, 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 post, post, post. Cinema, leadership, when she has the time, Vogue. Arizona's Republican Party headquarters, where to find it? Well, it's up in Phoenix. You got to follow the chemtrails past Area 51, take the Flat Earth Freeway through the Bermuda Triangle to Obama's birthplace in Nigeria, where a UFO piloted by lizard people will take you to a bunker in Phoenix next to where the moon landing was faked, right behind the QAnon clubhouse. Whew. I'm looking for Operation Warp Speed 2 to save us. If people could only be inoculated with facts, particularly those who've been radicalized online. It's a contagion, I tell you, it's a contagion. Thankfully, though, this fellow won, and this fellow exited the White House. 2021. I'm not breaking out the confetti until his winged monkeys are grounded. Yeah, that's the state of the party today. They are terrified of the power of Donald Trump, which was given to him, I believe, by the media outlets and talk radio, which worked hard for 35, 40 years to give him his followers. Meanwhile, Biden was hoping to take action, tax the rich their fair share, lift the middle class. Yeah, let's try trickle up. That's downright revolutionary. And perhaps the death knell of ridiculous supply side economics. But meanwhile, hey, Ron, want to come count ballots with us in Hangar 51? Wow. So while the world is worried about China and hackers and Russia and our economy and recovering from the pandemic, yeah, our fellow countrymen are in Maricopa County, counting ballots and using UV lights to look for bamboo in the paper. Meanwhile, in Congress, this feels familiar, doesn't it? Unity, bipartisanship, yep. 2012, I'm drawing the same issue. Barack Obama, bipartisanship? Yeah, get lucky. Bipartisanship? Nah, I love Rush. I love what the media tells me. It's really not so much what the media tells me as much as the angry listeners and consumers of that media's information tell me. And look what was happening in 2012. What do you know? Voter fraud was an issue. You have no idea how terrible I'm going to feel about the political collateral damage affecting voters' ability to vote in this election. Yeah. 2013. I warned them political parties would be our ruin. That's George Washington. Time for another revolution, asked Tom Jefferson. Don't say it, Abe, says TR. A house divided against itself. 2010, back in time. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Poof. American newspapers disappearing. Read all about it online. And you heard my last lecture. It's one of my great concerns for our democracy. Newspapers, local newspapers, perishing around the country. News deserts resulting across the land. Thousands of newspapers dead and gone. And what replaces them? Fox News, Sinclair Broadcasting, Facebook, Twitter, these silos of radicalizing misinformation. Goodbye, American newspapers. Oh, I just want to say I'm very fortunate. The Arizona Daily Star, we are thriving thanks to our digital product. So we're one of the few survivors, said the lucky cartoonist. 2021, we're back to the present. Hall of Republican heroes, Senator Sinema, friends of Mitch McConnell wing. In order to save democracy, she voted to destroy it. Hey, Mom, Putin's in the next hall. Goodbye. Meanwhile, did you hear something? Yeah, Savior of the Union just said impeach the insurrectionists. I was disappointed once again. Would they vote to impeach him? Nah. Not guilty by reason of insanity. His? Ours. He is so not guilty of using fear and intimidation to control people, which is exactly what he does. Look at this character in the lower left. This is my sense of what is the base today. The base, angry, he won, identifying with cultural issues, identifying with the Confederate flag, and feeling as though they can use physical force to achieve their ends. What better gangsters could you ask for if you were a mob boss? Arizona. Sire, a plague has decimated our kingdom. Pandemic. Your people suffer and want under crushing debt. So what does the governor want to do with these billions of dollars in state revenue? Does he want to pour it into making public education competitive in the 21st century? No. Does he want to pour it into extending unemployment benefits to people? No. What does he want to do? He wants to give tax cuts to his corporate lords, you peasants. Yeah. And during COVID, he was anything but heroic. He failed to act early. Would you like one scoop or two, says the ice cream man. Stone cold negligence, I call it. And then after this most recent State of the State address, he spoke with pride about how he handled the pandemic. He said a lockdown would have been a catastrophe. Well, ask the 10,000 or more Arizonans who died during this pandemic. It's interesting to me how blood on the hands of public figures just does not seem to stick. There they are again. That's partially why. Arrgh! Oh, this is my favorite. Mark Fincham. He is emblematic of the state of the party in Arizona today. A member of the Oath Keepers. He was present at the insurrection. He has not been punished for his participation by his fellow Republicans. He believes that Charlottesville is a deep state fake. He has extremist ties. He's convinced that Trump won. And he is the voice of a retirement community here in Southern Arizona. The retirees love him. And these are the cyber ninjas in Phoenix. Hey, isn't it cool to be a real life cyber ninja? Wow, ain't ninjas sneaky assassins? Who are we assassinating? Democracy, that's who we're assassinating. Why are you two opposed to investigating the January 6th insurrection? I wonder why McCarthy and Senator McConnell would be opposed. What insurrection? Where? Well, right here. It's your base. Yeah. That's why they're opposed to the insurrection, because so many in their party support and believe in the insurrection. Remember this? Yeah, the base. Images from Mars rover, Perseverance. Well, we got the service. Fascinating. I'm very proud of the University of Arizona's association with Mars research and interplanetary science. So here they are, images from the Mars rover Perseverance. Oh, Matt Damon, really? Oh, the rover Curiosity's up there? Oh, she found Perseverance. That's so cute. A life form on Mars? Oh, party headquarters. Maricopa County? Could be. Ted Cruz. I knew he'd end up there eventually. His home planet. 2006. Droughts have been around a long time out west. I mean, this cartoon here is almost 20 years old. But this drought, a little bit different. What we're going through out here in the west is a mega drought. You sure the one in the middle is our wildfire arsonist? I love this back and forth. This is fun. Yeah. Oh boy, I love making cartoons. Yeah, I think right now that's the leading wildfire arsonist. Last year I had a big fire here launched by a fool who did a gender reveal, and the gender reveal exploded and caused a brush fire. Of course, there are the fools who just don't put out the campfires. Then there are the lunatic arsonists, and then there are the circus act flamethrower flame eaters who are still around. Climate change. Is it me or is Tucson getting hotter? I had some kids write me letters wondering what this metaphor was. And I told them the story of how, a frog boiling a frog doesn't notice if to boil the water slow enough. I think we're starting to notice the impact of climate change. Water is becoming an issue. It's going to be the currency of the future, says the Bitcoiners. I don't think so. I think the currency of the future is going to be fresh water. Here in Arizona, we've pretty much exhausted our aquifers in the past, and then we shifted to Colorado River water, a blend with our aquifers. And in Tucson, we are banking our aquifer water. We have enough for maybe 100 years out. Other large cities in Arizona are not so good when it comes to banking their aquifer water. And Arizona keeps growing. Must keep growing, must keep growing. So we have fantasy visions. Ooh, there's one. Ooh. Constructing a pipeline from the Mississippi River to intersect with the Colorado River in order to pour the Mississippi floodwater runoff waters into the Colorado River to supplement that in hopes that that would elevate the water levels at Lake Mead behind Hoover Dam and replenish the water supply of Arizona. That would only cost $5 billion. I would hope that the cost of water would actually be passed on to us. That would limit growth, I think. Is there anybody left who thinks global warming is a hoax? Come to Tucson, please. And we do like to say, but it's a dry heat. Small comfort now as the temperatures scoot up pretty high. By 2050, it's expected that the overnight highs in Phoenix will easily be over 100 degrees, easily over 100 nights. It has been a very tough drought. Behind my home, I'm watching my desert turn to sand, losing prickly pear. Even our saguaro are suffering. Letting us know they're suffering with their odd display of flowers. They usually flower on the very tops, but now they're flowering up and down the sides of these plants. And we're hoping for the ancient rains, which have been coming for a couple of thousand years. Last year, they didn't come. This is what we hope happens. And this is why it should happen. It's because the saguaro blossoms, and it bears its red fruit, and it's picked by the desert people here, the Tana'ata, and they make it into wine. And as you can see in this cartoon, they make it for a ceremony in which the desert people drink the wine, regurgitate up the white foam, and call those the clouds that must be made in July that will fill the sky. And so if we do get rain, I want to thank the desert people for consuming that saguaro wine and bringing us the clouds in July. May it please come to pass. And I am eternally a hopeful American citizen. I was never more awestruck or impressed, I think, in my lifetime than when I got in the line behind the cars of citizens getting vaccinated by volunteers. And I asked one gentleman who was volunteering why he was doing it. He was an older fella. And he said to me, well, like I told my grandkids, I served my country once long ago. I'm happy to serve her again. I couldn't believe what I heard. He was like a character out of a Frank Capra movie. It was so moving and powerful and honest. And I thanked him for his service and his kindness. And it resonated with me as an American. What you see before you is a document authored in 1778. This notes the enlistment of my great, 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 great grandfather, Isham Brown, as a private in the Virginia 4th Regiment in General George Washington's army. He fought at Brandywine, Princeton, Trenton, and Valley Forge with rebels who had promised they were happy to risk their lives and their fortune. Well, he risked his farm when he returned in 1779. His farm was valueless. He divided it up among his 3 daughters, and he moved west to Missouri, where his headstone rests under maples in a beautiful cemetery. So I feel a bond with these individuals, with Isham and with James, my Civil War relation, to fight to preserve what remains of our Union, and to also honor the ideals of the revolutionaries who gave their all for our country's ideals. And that concludes this year's version of my talk. And I hope it's upset some enough to ask me hostile questions, which always pleases me. I want to thank everyone for their patience with my long show. I'm sorry there is no lasers, but give it my best shot.
Well, it's a pleasure having the ever shy David Fitzsimmons with us. And please submit your questions into the chat, and we'll bring you on so we can ask, or you can ask your questions directly. But the first one comes from Frankie Harris. Frankie, if you'd like to unmute yourself, you can ask your question.
I noticed that little creature that is beside your signature on some of your cartoons. Sometimes it says stuff and sometimes it doesn't. I just wonder, what is it? What is it supposed to symbolize? When did you start using it? What's the history of it?
Thank you for asking that question. That question makes me happy because I get to reminisce about a cartoonist I admire, who I think he's still alive, Pat Oliphant, who was a cartoonist at the Washington Star. He was a superstar among cartoonists when I was a kid in the 70s. He still is, I would say. He's retired to Santa Fe. In his cartoons, he would rely on the lower corner of his cartoons. He would use a small penguin. He was from Australia originally. He would use that penguin for the second or third joke that he just couldn't resist but insert into the cartoon. And I met him and I wondered if he would approve of me stealing directly from him, which I did. And I began to insert a cartoon character I used in gag cartoons, which was a quail, a little quail bird. And it was sort of a self-portrait, the quail with the eyeglasses. And the quail would be a vehicle for me to include the second joke I just couldn't let go of, or the second wisecrack. And he seems to be a popular little character. So I've used him in other cartoons that are just standalone with just him. And I thought of naming him Quincy, but I keep him nameless. But thank you for that question.
All right, thank you.
Susan Clark, if you'd like to ask your question.
You referred to the Fairness Act a few times, and I'm not sure I understand what that was or is.
That's a great question. And my answer will be disappointing because it'll be vague. Because I wish I could give you the actual dates, the details of it. But the Fairness Doctrine required that particularly radio broadcasters, and I believe it applied to television, I believe as well. It suggested that if you have a partisan advocate, if you air a partisan advocate who's going to argue a point of view on a subject, you are obligated by law, by fairness, to include opposition in the same amount of time. It was also called equal time to respond. During the Reagan era, that was chucked, and talk radio, right wing, 24/7 around the clock, right wing radio was born. And right wing radio was used by the major conservative think tanks as pulpits for the sermons which their right-wing theologians have been writing and thinking about for years. So they could easily feed Rush Limbaugh and Savage and others with all the talking points they would need. And then, of course, Fox News, Fox Partisan News was born. And so the Fairness Doctrine was the act that I thought America was fairly sane before then, but without it, it's like, wow, it just unleashed the dogs of lunacy. Good question, though. Thank you for that question.
All right, we've got another question that came in ahead of time that says, do you know why there was no editorial cartoon Pulitzer Prize awarded in 2021? The listing I saw had 3 finalists, but no award was given. Just curious.
I would have to guess at what the logic was of not awarding the Pulitzer Prize for editorial cartooning. My guess is that there may have been, oh, I shouldn't laugh, so few entries. And also the Pulitzer Committee has been drifting away from political cartoons. There was an argument made years ago by Ira Glass on National Public Radio, a fella I really like. He was complaining that the Pulitzer Committee, they're so stuffy. Why don't they let, for example, The Onion be submitted as political satire worthy of a Pulitzer? And then he went on to say, why do they even consider editorial cartoons? That's just a 17th century medium. And I thought, wow, in a way, he's right. We haven't advanced much beyond the lithographs of Francisco Goya. So I can see that perspective. Yeah, it's kind of a dated mode of communication. But I would simply guess that perhaps for the Pulitzer and the editorial cartoons, there just weren't enough entries. And they've also decided that editorial cartoons are irrelevant to contemporary journalism. But that would just be a guess.
Okay, and our next question comes from Susan Rubin. Susan, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
You're asking Susan Clark to unmute.
Sorry. Susan Rubin, there we go.
I just wondered if you have any kids and if they're following in your footsteps of politics and journalism.
That's a wonderful question, and I hope not. I have 3 wonderful children. My eldest is 36, my daughter. She lives in beautiful Phoenix, and her field is cybersecurity. So for a while, she fought Russian and North Korean hackers, and now she works for Charles Schwab, doing quite well. And with her family of 3 children, my 3 grandchildren, she is very creative, but she's also very pragmatic. So she chose a more lucrative path. My other 2 children are male humans. My middle son works for a digital imaging company and is a waiter and is a typical American who is saving his money so he can try to afford a house to get a start in life. And my 19-year-old is starting school in the fall and has the world's greatest job. He works at Goodwill at the donation door, and he comes home with the most amazing stories. And I told him he's such a good storyteller, he might want to consider being a writer. So I foisted Jack London on him as an example, and he loved him so much, he came by the house the other night to read me a favorite chapter from Call of the Wild. So I'm hopeful that he will be a communicator of some sort. But I must say, none of them are impressed that I've done stand-up comedy or that I'm a political cartoonist who was a Pulitzer finalist. I'm just the guy who yells at them. Thank you for that question.
Ann Horvitz, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question. Ann, are you able to? There you go. Go ahead, Ann.
After listening and watching all your left-wing leftist cartoons and commentary, I am left wondering whether there are any conservative voices among cartoonists, and who are they, and what papers would they be publishing in?
I would say that roughly half are conservative, and they tend to serve rural, smaller newspapers. In the Arizona Daily Star, we run two. We run Lisa Benson, who I don't believe is affiliated with the newspaper any longer, and Mike Lester, who is distributed by the Washington Post syndicate. Also, Gary McCoy is a very good conservative cartoonist. And then Steve Kelly, who's at the Pittsburgh Press Gazette. Those are the ones who come to mind who are prominent in my imagination and knowledge. And we gather at cartoonist conventions and we never quarrel politics. We talk about insipid issues like how to keep your pen nib damp. Those are the questions that occupy our minds. But, I must say, on an interesting note, I'm going to diverge here a bit. The fellow who syndicates my cartoons, Daryl Cagle of Cagle Cartoons, generous, wonderful man. He tells us, his stable of cartoonists, and it's a mix of conservative and liberal cartoonists. Newspapers this past year were not interested in running cartoons that were of a political nature or particularly about Donald Trump, because the blowback would be so harsh from Trump supporters to their newspapers. So they were a bit intimidated by that. I have a little story. Oh yeah, I see in the notes here, Henry Payne in Detroit, very conservative. But like many of us, he's doing double duty too. He's taken to writing editorials as well as drawing cartoons. I myself write a weekly column. Jack Oman in Sacramento does a weekly column and a podcast and the cartoons. But yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Henry Payne. I love his style. It's so visually beautiful. Oh, and also my friend Scott Standis. So, well, there are quite a few conservative cartoonists out there for you. Scott Standis is associated with the Chicago Tribune. He sort of fell out of favor as a Republican cartoonist because he was critical of Donald Trump. But now that Trump has kind of left the scene, he's coming back and railing against Joe Biden. So there's a diversity of voices out there for those who are interested in cartoons. Thank you for that question.
And I'm glad you mentioned Scott because he joined us last fall with your group of cadres. That was a lot of fun there. Paul Miller, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
David, nice work.
Thank you, sir.
My question was, I'm 40 miles north of Seattle, just to give you a perspective. And so do you see up and coming young political cartoonists on the future? Have you come across them, read any of their work? Are there replacements for you? I guess is a big question.
There are cartoonists who wish they were born 100 years earlier so they could replace us. But when cartoonists now leave a newspaper or retire, as I eventually will one day, they won't replace us. Yeah, we have a fan base that we typically will take with us. But there are young cartoonists, two I can think of. I think Sam Delonis would be one fellow who's a young guy whose work is occasionally featured on Kaggle. He's a very conservative fellow. And an acquaintance of mine as well, Chris Britt, who is distributed by the Creators Syndicate, is a young guy who, unfortunately, there are no newspaper spots open for either of these two cartoonists, but they survive through syndication, and they survive by having a presence online on their website. As does, this reminds me of another fellow I want to mention who was at the Pittsburgh Post Gazette. Oh, I wish I could remember his name. It's really sad when that goes. But he was bumped when a Trump editorial page editor was hired by the Pittsburgh Post, and Rob Rogers lost his gig after 40 years there, and he was replaced by Steve Kelly, my conservative Republican friend, who once asked me, "Do you know who's the most oppressed minority group in America is, Dave?" I said, "No, who?" He said, "White men." And he meant it. And I just, what could I say? I couldn't say, I said, really? Hey, some weather, let's grab lunch, okay? I didn't want to go into that cul-de-sac. But thank you for that good question. I want to add also, Paul, that I think the young people are going in the direction of videos and memes more so than political cartooning, unfortunately. But I like the new stuff. I'm trying not to be a curmudgeon. Yeah. So yeah, the landscape's always changing. Thanks for that question, Paul.
You're welcome.
We've got Guy Brunt. Guy, if you'd like to ask your question.
Yeah, Fitz, I've enjoyed you since we moved out here in 2011, and we're big fans. I watched with interest your how to draw a quail piece that you had posted up on Facebook. And it kind of spurred a question in my mind. Are you drawing digitally these days, or are you hand drawing most of your cartoons?
It is a mix. I begin by hand drawing my cartoons on the my drawing board back there. I love that desk. When the Arizona Daily Star closed down print at the paper, they had these desks in the back shop on which the compositors would assemble the newspapers using wax and paper. And this was a perfect glass top table for me. And I would begin my cartoons as little small roughs, tiny little roughs, roughed out. Aren't you glad I'm wearing pants? This is impressive. And then I would begin to build the cartoons, layering them, tracing them over and over until I get a design I like. And I draw them on plain compute typing paper using very inexpensive pens, laundry pens. I tried fancier media, but that just wasn't as satisfying as the pens I had used in high school when I was a misbehaving student. Once I finished the black and white line drawing, I scan it into the system, and then I use Photoshop to color the image and make it just right before I send it out to the syndicate to distribute it among the clients, and also to the Arizona Daily Star, and post it up online. It generally takes me, sometimes it can take hours to come up with a cartoon idea. Other moments, it will just take a matter of seconds, that flash of the light bulb over one's head. But the rendering of the cartoon generally takes me now about an hour. And then to scan it, complete it, send it up, maybe another half an hour. When I was young, it used to take me 12 hours on average. But now that I'm an old man, I should be pretty good at it, which I finally feel like I'm confident about my craft at age 60. Guy, thank you so much for that question, and thank you for your kindness, fan. Yes, it's good to have encouraging fans. I'm lucky.
And the next question, Jay Gandolfi has a similar related question related to your creative process. Jay, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think you've already answered that. Do you already have it all in your mind as to what you're going to draw when you start, or do you kind of have a general thing and then create and more as you draw? In other words, I'd like to see your vision. Is it all complete when you start, or do you basically get that vision more as you get pinned or to paper and keep drafting?
Good question. I hope this is comforting because this is the truth. The ideas come to me constantly because I have the habit, and generally what spurs them is something will either irritate or charm me, something that happens in the news, and it will mull a bit, and I'm constantly making notes. I'm doing the old man thing. Do you have any of you have really old male friends? You know, the guys who put the little notes and scraps of paper in their front shirt pocket. Oh, that's me. I got all these notes. These are notes when I think about cartoon issues. And it's generally a culling of the ideas that I think would be most effective at conveying my opinion in an amusing or palatable fashion. And that's the work part of it. It's pretty easy to come up with a subject that will evoke an opinion, but what is challenging is to find a metaphor or analogy that's entertaining or fresh, and that requires even more work. And that's where I'll do multiple sketches, and I'll also engage in free association in almost a scientific approach, which calls for list making, which is a craft I saw practice primarily when I started doing stand-up comedy, and I watch other comedians work on their jokes. Endless lists looking for just the right word for the punchline. So I engage in that kind of list making myself. Yes?
I think Jay got a phone call.
Oh, that's good.
But no, thank you for that. And speaking of your stand-up, I know periodically you guys get together with your Still Standing Up team, and some of those are OLLI members who are part of our stand-up comedy class. When's the next Still Standing Up going to happen? I understand you were at Laughs yesterday.
I was at Laughs yesterday performing alone. Well, I was with teachers, but I know that Still Standing Up, we're going to participate in the dedication of the new community food bank warehouse. So we're going to be entertaining the volunteers at that wonderful community asset. So that'll be coming up, and that'll be our crowd. To belong and still standing up, you have to be a comedian who's 65 years old or older. And many of the volunteers, of course, in Tucson are not spring chickens. So we're going to have a wonderful time. And I want to thank OLLI for supporting humor and providing you're the seedbed for good comedians. Thank you.
Richard Burke has a question. Richard, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Sure. Aloha, Dave. We used to hang out in high school together.
Good school, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's been a long time. Have you ever thought about doing podcasts? I mean, this has been very entertaining listening to you. And I don't get your cartoons here, but I do look them up occasionally. So it's been very entertaining. Have you ever thought about doing a podcast?
Well, Richard, you're very kind. Thank you. I haven't thought about doing a podcast. I do participate in a star reader chat that we do once a week via Zoom when we have a special guest, and I'll participate in that. But as for that kind of creative energy, I direct that into producing theatrical shows modeled after Garrison Keillor's Prairie Home Companion. Ours is called the Old Pueblo Radio Show, featuring the Arroyo Cafe Players. And this show at this point now is in the last time it was an annual Christmas time show held in downtown Tucson with a cast and musicians and a house band. I love the thrill of producing that radio show. That is so much fun. And as for a podcast, by the time I get done drawing 4 cartoons and writing a column, I'm winded.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
And your radio show is not available online?
It is. We generally post it after it airs. So you can find out about it. I posted at the top of this chat, and maybe I can post it again. My Facebook page. Yeah, got it. I'll post it again for you. That is a great source of what I am up to. For example, August 22nd, I'm going to be roasted. I don't know why anyone would want to roast a nice, pleasant man like me, but I'm going to be roasted at El Casino Ballroom August 22nd. So that'll be great fun. And it's a fundraiser for one of my favorite things here in Tucson, mariachis. So yay for that.
Excellent.
Hey, thanks for that question. Go Rangers, Rincon rocks. It was a great school.
Richard's a good old friend to re-know because he lives in Hawaii. So when you're ready, you can reach out to Richard again.
Yeah, reach out to me.
Handsome man.
Thank you, Richard. All right, Myrna, let me get Myrna up here. Myrna Armstrong, if you'd like to ask your question.
I haven't heard any discussion about women within your profession. Are there women, and how are they doing?
Thank you for that question. 2 of my favorite cartoonists who come to mind are Ann Tellnaes, Tellnaes, who is now the Washington Post's cartoonist. She replaced Tom Tolles when Tom retired. She's been cartooning for 2 decades or more. She was educated as a Disney animator. Her line work is gorgeous. And another peer of hers that comes to mind is my good friend, I'm laughing, Cena Wilkinson, Signe Wilkinson, Philadelphia. She was always fun at conferences because she'd bring her children, and she was a good Quaker woman with a really interesting history of global travel and mission work. And I'm laughing because these 2 individuals, being female humans, I learned early on, they had a very, and one of the reasons I support diversity is because they have a moral authority to draw some cartoons that a man doesn't have, that a man lacks. One of my favorite Cena cartoons was, and she did great prize-winning very serious cartoons. This one I'm remembering is trivial, but it made me laugh. And it was in response to the Octo mom. You remember the mom who had 8 children? And so she drew a woman, she drew the brassiere for an 8-breasted woman. Quiet. And I laughed at that and I thought, oh my goodness, I certainly couldn't get away with it. But I can't remember the labels were, but it was a light cartoon, but it had a serious point about population. I'm ashamed I cannot remember a woman I just learned about. African-American female cartoonist, 1950s through the 60s. I wish I could remember her name, but I'm sure if you just Google it, Google her, Google African-American woman, political cartoonist, she'll come up. And darn, I wish I could remember her name because I just learned about her. And at this age, I'm lucky I remembered to Zoom today. But her work was gorgeous to look at. And it's always interesting to see that period of history through the eyes of another. But that's a good question. That was a good point about the role of women in cartooning. I have to say that when I went to my first conference 30 years ago, the women just, wow, they really stood out. But now they are definitely a part of the, I was going to say fraternity, but they're shifting the balance in terms of gender. And also that's happened in terms of race with African-American and Latino cartoonists. They may not be the prominent editorial cartoonists, but they do exist online and are in the marketplace of ideas. Good question. Thank you very much for that question.
Thank you.
We have Mary Tony. Let me see. There we go. Mary Tony Dolan, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've loved every minute of this, and I'm going to look up more of your cartoons online. I'm in Virginia. Grateful to Ollie for sharing. My question, can you share any of your son's anecdotes? I used to practically live at Goodwill, got some great treasures. I can't remember anything funny though. So please share if you can.
Well, my wife and I, we are Goodwill scavengers. We are regulars. My wife is a rare book collector and finds amazing treasures at Goodwill. There's like, what? But my son came home and he, let's see if I can remember, one story made me laugh. He did his impression of what he called entitled donor. And the entitled donor drove up in her small car, which was packed to the ceiling with litter and garbage, essentially. And she just looked at him through the window and she just kind of rudely, she pointed at him and then gestured to the back to just get it. And then he pointed to the sign, which pointed out that he can't put his hands inside anyone else's vehicles, that if you're donating, you have to get out of your car and put the objects on the cart. And he said I can't do it, but his mime of her dramatic, infuriated, slow exit from the driver's side of her vehicle as she heaved herself up and waddled back in fury and pulled it out item by item and item, just made me roar with laughter. The other story he tells is, he said he's noticed something very interesting at this particular Goodwill. He noticed a number of customers who come in as regulars and bring order to sections they favor. There's an older gentleman who comes in and straightens out the furniture section. Another fellow who comes in and goes to the electrical. And there's even he said there's an elderly woman who alphabetizes the books. Even
wow.
So I thought, wow, that's interesting. There's this army of Goodwill angels out there.
Yeah.
Very bored souls.
Maybe they're trying to pass their decluttering classes. I've flunked all mine.
That's it. Oh, that's it. Yeah. Goodwill. That place is the seat of wonderful clutter. Thank you for that. Thank you for that question.
When I was a kid, we had Value Village where I was at instead of Goodwill, but I remember fondly a 21st century real estate polyester gold coat that I wore proudly during my high school years from there. So this next question, you're going to want to be very careful how you answer, I think, given our audience, but Stuart Goldman has a question for you. Stuart, go ahead.
Hi, Dave. My question is, do you ever receive, peace out, do you ever receive and use input from your readership for ideas to produce complete with instructions how to execute them? And they're so elegant, that you have no choice other than to take their suggestion that this would be best drawn with 3 polar bears playing trombones. That's my question.
That is a very good question. Typically, when a reader submits such an idea, almost always via email, I respond with a very polite note. Thank you so much for sharing your vision. It was delightful and inspiring. I can't guarantee that it will appear in print, and I typically will leave it at that. But the point is, yeah, I do not use other people's ideas, because for me, that is my primary task, is to daily come up with a political cartoon idea on my own and then render it. But after years of this issue rising up, I suggested to the editorial board at the Star that maybe we should include a feature akin to letters to the editor, only let's call it cartoons to the editor. And that would be for individuals who just happen to doodle better than they write, so they could draw up their own ideas and submit them. And we do run many cartoons to the editor. And I encourage people, reminding them that sometimes the least well drawn, the most poorly drawn can sometimes be winners. I mean, if you look at the work of Tom Tolles, who won multiple Pulitzers, he was no Vincent van Gogh. So I encourage folks to draw up their own cartoon ideas and thank them so much for thinking of me.
Okay.
Thank you for the question.
Whoops, I'm sorry. I go ahead. And unmute yourself again, Stuart. I cut you off. I'm
Okay, forgive me. Just as an afterthought, I remember a cartoonist, Jimmy Hatlow, and they'll do it every time, it was called, I believe. And he would solicit ideas from his readership, and he would acknowledge at the bottom, it would say, thanks and a tip of the Hatlow hat to John Doe in Poughkeepsie. So some people do that. He wasn't editorial, but it was, you know, he was an entertaining kind of cartoonist. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Stuart. It's interesting you know that, because I remember that tip of the hat. A number of cartoonists around the country did that. A few years back, I created cartoons for a caption contest where I would draw the cartoon figures and leave the thought balloon or the caption balloon empty to leave it to readers to fill. But we abandoned the contest because so many entries were inappropriate. Thank you for that. Good question.
All right. I think we've come to the end of Q&A.
Here we are.
Want to thank you so much for helping us again to get through this last year and make our way through 2021. And you've been a wonderful friend to Ollie for a very long time. So we really appreciate you coming back and helping us cap off our academic year with our last speaker series.
Scott, thank you so much for inviting me. I always greatly enjoy Ollie, and I always feel moved to customize my presentation because I know that the Ollie participants are smart and engaged and aware, and thus for me it's a joy. It invigorates me to be with this group. So thank you very much for inviting me to spew my partisan swill here among good friends. So thank you.
Thank you. And thanks to everybody for joining us from around our membership here in Tucson and around the country, and enjoy your last couple weeks of Volley summer. And we'll see you again for the speaker series for Monsoon. So take care, everybody. David, thank you again, and be well, everybody. Bye-bye.